The night in deep space was silent, endless, and cold. The research ship Odyssey floated through the black void like a lonely shadow. Far from any planet or star, most of the crew slept. But one person stayed awake, engineer Mira Collins. She sat in the control room, staring at the blinking lights on her monitor. Her shift was supposed to be calm, a routine systems check. Nothing more than something changed. A faint signal appeared on her screen, small but steady. It pulsed once every few seconds, a strange, rhythmic beat. At first, she thought it was interference, maybe a drifting satellite or a rock bouncing signals. But the pulse had a pattern, a heartbeat rhythm, and it seemed to grow stronger. Mira leaned closer to the screen. The signal came from outside the ship, from something floating near the asteroid belt ahead. She adjusted the sensors and zoomed in. There it was, a small black cube, perfectly smooth, spinning slowly in the dark. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. It didn't reflect light. It absorbed it. The pulse was coming from that cube, deep and steady, like something alive. Her heart began to beat in time with the signal. She opened the communication line. "Commander Reyes, you need to see this," a voice answered. "Calm and deep, on my way." Within minutes, Commander Elias Reyes entered the control room, his face unreadable. He looked at the screen and tilted his head. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he smiled, a small, quiet smile. "We've been waiting for this," he said softly. Mira frowned. "What do you mean, waiting? You knew about this signal?" Reyes didn't answer. He only ordered her to prepare the drone to bring the object aboard. She hesitated. Something about the pulse made her nervous. But she followed orders. The drone launched, its lights cutting through the darkness. When it reached the cube, the pulse grew faster. The readings went wild. Energy levels climbing, temperature dropping, Mira whispered. "It's reacting to us." Reyes just watched. Still calm, still smiling. The cube was brought into the ship's lab. It sat in the middle of a sealed chamber. Perfectly still, Mira stood behind the glass wall, watching the monitors. The pulse continued, went soft, steady, alive. When she placed her hand against the glass, the pulse sped up again. Her breath caught. "It's responding to touch," she said. Reyes looked at her and said quietly, "Don't be afraid, Mira. This is history," but deep inside, Mira was afraid. Every instinct told her this wasn't right. Machines didn't behave like living creatures. The pulse was too organic, too personal. It felt like it was inside her, calling her as she watched. The cube began to glow faint blue light. The light flickered like veins under skin, pulsing faster and faster. Then, without warning, the ship's lights flickered too, all around them. Systems dimmed and screens turned black. The hum of the engines faded for a second, then returned, weaker. Mira turned toward Reyes, alarmed. "It's interfering with our systems," Reyes simply said. "No, it's connecting," the word echoed in her mind. "Connecting." She looked at the glowing cube and felt something move inside her chest, a faint vibration as if her own heart was answering the pulse. She stepped back, shaking her head. "This isn't safe." "Commander," Reyes didn't reply, his eyes fixed on the cube. When the power returned, the pulse had changed again. Now it wasn't one beat. It was two. Two rhythms, syncing together, one human, one alien. That night Mira couldn't sleep. The hum of the pulse echoed through the ship's walls. It was faint but constant, impossible to ignore. When she closed her eyes, she saw flashes and stars, lights, shapes she couldn't understand. She woke up sweating, her heart racing. The pulse was still there, beating through her like a second heartbeat. She went back to the lab and found Reyes already there. He stood close to the cube, the glow reflecting on his face. He turned slightly when she entered, that same strange smile on his lips. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said, Mira whispered. "It feels alive." Reyes nodded. "It is alive, and it chose us." Her stomach turned. "What do you mean it chose us?" she asked. Reyes didn't answer. The cube pulsed faster, the blue light growing brighter. The glass wall began to hum with energy. Mira stepped back, eyes wide. The cube's glow filled the room like a heartbeat made of light. Then everything went silent, completely silent. Even the hum of the ship stopped. Mira stared through the glass. The cube wasn't there anymore. It had vanished, leaving behind only the faint echo of that pulse. And in that silence, she could swear she still heard it, inside her own chest, beating slow and steady, like it had never left at all. Mira woke up gasping, her heart beating faster than it should. For a moment she thought she was still dreaming. The room around her felt strange, colder than before. A soft humming sound filled the air, not from the ship's engines, but something deeper, something alive. It was that same rhythm again, the same pulse she had heard in her head last night. Slow, steady, impossible to ignore. She sat up and looked around. The lights flickered for a second. The shadows in the corners seemed to move. Her cabin door opened with a faint hiss, though she hadn't touched it. She stepped into the hallway, heart pounding. The sound of footsteps echoed ahead, hurried. Uneven, afraid, Lieutenant Kara, she called out. The young officer turned, eyes wide, her face pale. Ma'am? Something's wrong with the power grid, Kara said, her voice shaking. The systems keep restarting. But the sources, it's not mechanical, it's biological. Mira frowned. Biological? That doesn't make sense, but deep down, she already knew what it meant. They both hurried to the control deck. Half the monitors showed static, and the rest flickered between warning messages. In the corner of the room, 2 engineers were arguing. Panic rising in their voices, one of them shouted, "It's spreading through the ship's wiring like it's growing inside." The other snapped, "It's just a glitch, stop talking nonsense." But then the lights dimmed again and everyone fell silent. The pulse came back, louder this time. It was no longer a sound, it was a feeling, moving through the floor, through the walls. Through every breath they took, someone whispered, "It's inside the ship." Mira stared at the screen, and for a moment, she could see something like a heartbeat pattern moving across the data feed. The cube was gone, but its energy was still here. Commander Reyes entered, his calm presence cutting through the chaos. He looked at the trembling crew and said, "Control yourselves. It's under observation." Mira turned to him, angry. "Under observation? The ship is alive. People are terrified." Reyes only smiled faintly. Fear is normal when something new is born. The words chilled her. Born. What was he talking about? Hours passed, but things got worse. Crew members started to complain about headaches. Some said they heard whispers in the dark, voices calling their names. Others felt their heartbeat syncing with the pulse. One technician fainted near the power core, his veins glowing faint blue under his skin. When they rushed him to the med bay, the doctor shouted, "It's like radiation poisoning, but the readings don't match anything known." Mira stood near the door, watching through the glass. The technician's body shook as if something inside him was moving. Then, for one brief second, his eyes opened, glowing the same eerie blue as the cube. He whispered something she couldn't hear, and the monitors around him went dark. The pulse stopped for a moment, then came back stronger. Mira felt it in her bones. It was spreading, learning, adapting. That night, she couldn't stay still. She walked through the silent corridors of the ship. Every metal wall seemed to breathe. Every shadow seemed to twitch. The hum of the pulse followed her like a heartbeat from the walls. She reached the lab, or what was left of it. The glass chamber that once held the cube was cracked. Strange blue marks, like veins, ran through the metal floor, glowing faintly in the dark. She touched one. It felt warm, almost like skin. She pulled her hand back, terrified. Then she heard a voice, soft, low, familiar. "Mira!" She turned quickly, but no one was there. Her chest tightened. "Who's there?" The voice came again. "Don't be afraid." It was Reyes, but distant, echoing from the ship's intercom. She rushed to the bridge when she arrived. She saw him standing near the main viewport, staring into space, the stars reflected in his eyes. "You should rest," he said. Not looking at her, Mira's voice trembled. "What's happening to us?" Reyes finally turned to face her, his calm, cold smile still there. "It's not happening to us, Mira," he said quietly. "It's happening through us." She stepped back, confusion and fear twisting inside her. "What are you talking about?" she asked. Reyes sighed softly. "This pulse, it's not a threat, it's an invitation." Mira shook her head. "Invitation to what?" He didn't answer, only looked at her like a teacher watching a student who wasn't ready yet. Then he said, "Go rest, Engineer Collins, the awakening has only just begun." When she returned to her cabin, she felt dizzy. She looked in the mirror. For a split second, her eyes glowed blue. She blinked and it was gone. But when she touched her chest, she could feel it. That same pulse, deep and steady, matching the one echoing through the ship, as if something alien was now inside her too. And in the dark, she realized one terrible truth. The cube hadn't vanished. It had found a new place to hide. It was inside them. Mira didn't sleep that night. The pulse in her chest was too strong, too alive. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of light, strange symbols, and shadowy figures whispering in a language she didn't understand. Her heartbeat and the pulse were one now, steady and synchronized. It was no longer something outside her. It had become part of her. The next morning, she woke to alarms echoing through the corridors. The lights flickered red as emergency beacons flashed. Crew members ran past her cabin shouting orders, fear in every voice. Something was wrong with the ship's reactor. It was producing energy spikes that couldn't be explained. But Mira already knew. The pulse was feeding on the ship. She rushed to the engineering bay, her tools clattering in her hands. When she arrived, the walls were covered with faint blue lines. They pulsed slowly, crawling like veins beneath the metal. An engineer was kneeling near the control panel. Whispering to himself, Mira knelt beside him. "Hey, what's happening?" He looked up, his eyes wide and glowing faintly. "It's beautiful," he said in a trembling voice. "It's speaking to us." Before she could reply, he collapsed, unconscious. Mira backed away, panic rising in her chest. She needed answers, not guesses. Not theories, but truth. Reyes knew more than he was saying. She could feel it in the way he looked at her. She decided to go to the command deck and find out for herself. The halls felt different as she walked. The hum of the engines had changed pitch, softer now, more like breathing. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain on hot metal. The ship didn't feel like a machine anymore. It felt like a living thing. When she reached the bridge, she found it empty. Only Reyes's terminal was active, glowing with blue light. She hesitated, then began typing. Most files were locked, but one folder wasn't. It was labeled Project Helios. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Dozens of classified reports appeared on the screen. The first line froze her heart. Subject: Human-AI Biosymbiosis Experiment. Initiated under command authorization of Elias Reyes. She scrolled through the files. Reading faster, the Odyssey was never a research vessel. It was a test ship. The real mission was to connect human consciousness with alien technology. The cube had been discovered decades ago on a dead world, pulsing faint energy. Every attempt to study it had failed, until they realized it responded to emotion. To human thoughts, to empathy, it didn't want to be controlled. It wanted to bond. The experiment was meant to merge the cube's living energy with a human host, to create a bridge between species, to make something new. And Mira realized the awful truth. She was that host. Her mind spun as she leaned against the console. Everything made sense now. Why Reyes had smiled. Why he wasn't afraid. He had known this would happen. She wasn't part of the mission. She was the mission. The pulse in her chest grew stronger, almost angry. Her breath quickened, and the lights around her began to flicker in rhythm with her heartbeat. The ship was responding to her emotions, just like a living organism reacting to pain. Then the door opened and Reyes walked in. He didn't look surprised to see her at his terminal. "You've been reading," he said calmly. His voice almost gentle. Mira glared at him. "You used me. You turned me into an experiment." Reyes tilted his head slightly. "Not an experiment, Mira, a connection." She shook her head. "You lied to everyone. People are getting sick. The ship is dying." Reyes smiled faintly. "No, it's transforming. And so are you." He stepped closer, and for the first time, she noticed something strange in his eyes, a faint blue reflection, pulsing in the same rhythm as hers. Her voice trembled. You're part of it too." He nodded. "I was the first, but the cube didn't choose me completely. It chose you." Mira backed away, her mind racing. "What does it want?" she asked. Reyes looked past her, toward the stars outside. "It wants to evolve, to make us more than human," he said softly. "And it's using you to do it." The screens around them began to glow brighter. Blue light filled the bridge, soft but intense for a moment. Mira saw her reflection in the glass, her eyes shining, her veins glowing faintly beneath her skin. Her voice broke. "I'm turning into one of them." Reyes shook his head. "No. You're becoming the bridge between us and them." The words hit her like a wave. Bridge. She didn't want to be a bridge, and she wanted her life back, her body back. But deep down, the pulse inside her whispered something different. It wasn't pain, it wasn't anger. It was curiosity, warmth, almost love. The cube was speaking to her now. Not with words, but with feelings, and somehow she understood. It wasn't trying to destroy her, it was trying to understand her. Rhea stepped closer, his eyes glowing brighter. "Do you feel it?" he asked, Mira whispered. "Yes, and it scares me." He smiled faintly. "Good. That means you're still human." The bridge lights dimmed. The hum returned. Outside, the stars seemed to shimmer as if watching. Mira stood there trembling. She didn't know if she was saving humanity or becoming something that could end it. And as the pulse inside her steadied once more, she realized one thing. This was only the beginning. The next morning, Mira felt the ship breathing with her. Every time she inhaled, the lights brightened. Every time her heart beat, the walls around her seemed to vibrate softly. It was no longer just a coincidence. The ship was alive, and somehow it was connected to her. She walked through the hallways in silence. Crew members stared at her as she passed, whispering under their breath. They had seen what she could do, how the lights and doors responded to her emotions. Some were afraid, others angry, but none of them trusted her anymore. To them, she wasn't Mira Collins, the engineer they knew. She was something else now, something strange. Something not quite human. As she entered the control deck, she heard the hum of machinery changing tone. The ship's main console flickered with streams of blue light. Rhea stood near the viewport, watching the stars, his hands folded behind his back. Without turning, he said, "It's growing stronger inside you, isn't it?" Mira stopped, her throat tight. "I can't stop it," she whispered. "It's inside everything, the systems. The ship, even me." Reyes turned slowly, his expression calm as always. "You shouldn't try to stop it," he said. "You should listen to it," she glared at him. "Listen? It's killing us." He smiled faintly. "No, it's changing us." The lights around them pulsed in time with his words. Mira felt anger rise inside her, but before she could shout, the console beside her exploded in sparks. The energy burst knocked her backward, throwing her to the floor. When she looked up, she saw her hand glowing faint blue, like living light under her skin. She gasped and clenched her fist. The glow faded instantly. The lights on the ship steadied again. She realized something terrifying. Her emotions were controlling the ship's systems. Hours passed in tension. The crew gathered in the mess hall, whispering, arguing. Some demanded that Mira be locked up, saying she was dangerous. Others said she might be the only one keeping the ship alive. When she entered, the room went silent. Every eye turned toward her. She could feel their fear like a heavy weight pressing on her chest. Lieutenant Kara stood up, shaking. "Mira, you need to tell us what's happening." Mira hesitated, her voice low. "The ship, it's connected to me somehow." Kara's eyes widened. "So you're doing this? The lights, the power surges?" Mira shook her head quickly. "Not on purpose, it reacts to how I feel." Another crewman shouted. "That thing inside you is controlling everything. You're infected!" Voices rose around the room, angry, frightened, desperate. The pulse in her chest began to quicken. The lights above them flickered wildly. "Stop it!" Someone screamed, "I'm trying!" Mira shouted back, but the pulse was stronger now. It was like an ocean wave crashing through her body. Unstoppable blue energy burst from the ceiling. Throwing tables aside, people screamed as the walls rippled like liquid. And then silence, smoke filled the air. Mira stood in the middle of the room, trembling, her hands glowing with faint light. No one spoke, no one moved. They only stared at her with horror and awe. She whispered, "I didn't mean to." From the doorway, a calm voice said, "I know." Reyes stepped inside, his face illuminated by the faint blue glow. "This is what awakening looks like," he said softly. "The pulse is syncing with your emotions," Mira's voice broke. "It's not awakening, it's destroying us." Reyes shook his head. "No, it's showing us who we really are." He stepped closer, his eyes glowing now too, brighter than before. She realized the pulse wasn't only inside her anymore. It was spreading through the crew. Some of them were already changing, their skin faintly shimmering under the light. The transformation had begun later. In the quiet of the observation deck, Mira stared out into space. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass, veins of light tracing under her skin. She touched the glass and saw it ripple, as if the ship itself responded to her touch. The pulse hummed through her fingertips. For a moment she felt calm. Then a whisper filled her mind, a voice not her own. It wasn't human, but it was clear. "We are one heartbeat," it said. "We grow together or we die together." She gasped and stepped back. Her breathing quickened, the voice faded, but the words stayed in her head. She turned to find Reyes standing behind her again, silent. "You heard it, didn't you?" he asked quietly. Mira nodded. "It spoke to me." He smiled faintly. "It speaks to those it trusts." She frowned. "And what if I don't trust it?" Reyes looked at her with calm eyes. "Then it will make you trust it." Before she could respond, the ship's alarm sounded again. Kara's voice came over the intercom. "Commander, we're losing control of the navigation system." Reyes tapped his communicator. "Stabilize it manually." But Mira knew it wouldn't work. The ship wasn't following commands anymore, it was moving on its own. Outside the viewport, the stars blurred. The Odyssey changed course, heading toward a dark, swirling cloud of energy, something not on any map. Reyes stared at it, then smiled faintly. "It's taking us home," he whispered. Mira shook her head in disbelief. "No," she said softly. "It's taking us somewhere we're not meant to go." The pulse inside her chest throbbed once, hard enough to make her gasp. And in that moment, she understood one terrible truth. The cube wasn't gone, it was guiding them. The Odyssey drifted through the endless dark, guided by something unseen. Outside, the stars stretched into long lines of silver light, as if space itself was bending. Inside, the crew moved in silence, every sound heavy with fear. No one dared to speak too loudly anymore. The hum of the pulse filled every corner of the ship. A slow heartbeat that never stopped. Mira stood at the observation window, staring at the strange cloud they were approaching. It was massive, swirling with colors that shifted like liquid glass. It wasn't a nebula or a storm, it was alive. The cube's energy had led them straight into it. She could feel it pulling her, calling her, whispering her name like a soft echo in her mind. Behind her, Reyes entered quietly. He didn't need to say anything. The look on his face said it all. He knew what this was. Mira turned to him, her eyes glowing faint blue. "Tell me the truth," she said, her voice trembling. "What is this place?" Reyes walked closer, hands behind his back, his expression calm as always. "This," he said softly, "is where the cube was born." Mira froze. "Born?" Her mind struggled to understand. "You mean, this thing has a home?" she whispered. Reyes nodded slowly. "It's not a machine, Mira. It's a memory, a living consciousness created by a species that no longer exists." He looked out the window, his voice low. "They were called the Alithians, beings of pure energy and light, older than humanity itself." Mira stared at him in disbelief. "You knew all this?" Reyes nodded again. The project was never about discovery. It was about communication. Her chest tightened, the pulse inside her throbbing in sync with the glow of the cloud. "You used me to talk to them," she said quietly. "You turned me into a messenger." Reyes looked at her, his expression unreadable. "No," he said softly. "They chose you to be the messenger." The words hit her like a wave. She stepped back, shaking her head. "Why me?" Reyes smiled faintly. "Because you didn't fear the unknown. You tried to understand it." The pulse around them grew louder. Faster, the ship's walls began to shimmer. Through the windows, streaks of blue light moved like veins through the cosmic cloud. Every system on the ship flickered as if reacting to Mira's heartbeat. She closed her eyes and saw flashes of tall, glowing beings, vast cities made of light, and a voice that spoke without sound. "You are the bridge," it said. "You carry what we were, and what you can become." Mira gasped, falling to her knees. Reyes knelt beside her, his voice steady. "You're seeing them, aren't you?" She nodded weakly, her hands trembling. "They're showing me everything." The visions came faster. She saw the Alithians creating the cube as their final act before extinction. They poured their thoughts, emotions, and memories into it. A living archive. A seed of their existence. They wanted someone to find it, to carry their light forward. But humans didn't find it by accident. Reyes's project had been searching for decades, and now it had found its host, her. When the vision faded, Mira opened her eyes, tears running down her face. "They weren't trying to hurt us," she whispered. "They were trying to connect." Reyes nodded slowly. "Exactly. But you wanted to control it," she said bitterly. "That's why the experiment failed before." He sighed. Humans always want control, Mira. We can't help it. She looked at him, her voice trembling. And now it's out of your control, isn't it? Reyes smiled faintly. Maybe that's what was meant to happen. Suddenly, the ship shook violently. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the crew screamed over the comms. Kara's voice came through. Commander, we're losing structural integrity. The pulse is destabilizing the ship. Reyes grabbed the console. His voice calm but urgent. Stabilize it manually. Divert power to... Before he could finish, the power died. The only light left was the blue glow coming from Mira. She stood still, her eyes bright, her voice soft. It doesn't want to hurt us, it wants to be heard. She reached out toward the console. When her hand touched it, blue light spread across every surface. The hum deepened into a melody, like 1,000 voices singing in harmony. The crew fell silent, watching in awe for the first time. The pulse wasn't frightening, it was beautiful. Mira's voice echoed through the room, layered with another alien tone. They are speaking through me, she said. They say we were never alone. Reyes watched her. His eyes wide, he whispered, You've done it. You've opened the bridge, but Mira shook her head slowly. No, they did. Then she looked at him with sadness in her eyes. They trusted me because I didn't see them as gods or weapons, I saw them as life. Outside, the cloud pulsed once. A bright wave of light spreading across the darkness. The ship's alarm stopped, the shaking ended, and calm returned. The energy readings stabilized completely. The cube's presence filled every system, gentle and warm. For a long moment, there was peace. Reyes stood beside her, his face lit by the soft glow. What happens now? He asked quietly. Mira stared into the living cloud, her voice calm but distant. They're giving us a choice, she said, to become something new. Or to stay as we are. Reyes looked at her. And what do you want? She turned to him, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. I want the truth, she whispered. No more lies, no more control. Just truth. And as the ship drifted deeper into the living light, the pulse inside Mira grew stronger than ever. Not as a threat, but as a promise. A promise that humanity's story was only just beginning. The ship floated in silence, surrounded by a sea of light. The stars were gone, replaced by glowing threads of energy stretching forever. It didn't feel like space anymore. It felt like being inside a living dream. The crew stood at their stations, speechless, watching the strange beauty outside. Everything was calm, but under that calmness, something powerful was building. Mira stood near the center console, her hands still glowing faint blue. The cube hovered beside her, spinning slowly, whispering in a language no one could understand. It felt alive, curious, waiting, watching. Reyes stood a few steps behind her, his expression a mix of awe and fear. He had seen many things in his life, but nothing like this. This was beyond science, beyond logic, beyond human comprehension. Mira, he said quietly. What are they showing you now? She turned to him, her eyes shimmering with light. They're not showing me, they're asking me. Reyes frowned. Asking you what? To decide, she whispered. They've seen what humanity has done, what we can become, and they want me to choose what comes next. The words hung in the air like a blade. Reyes stepped closer. Choose? How? What do you mean? Mira looked out the window again, her voice soft but firm. They can merge with us, share their knowledge, their consciousness, but it will change everything, forever. Reyes froze. You mean, humanity won't be the same, he said slowly. She nodded. No more boundaries, no more secrets, no more lies, just one shared mind. He shook his head. That's not evolution, that's surrender. Mira turned to him, her gaze calm but steady. Or maybe it's unity. The pulse in the ship grew louder. Faster. Kara's voice came through the intercom. Panicked. Commander! Energy levels are rising again. The cube's output is off the charts. Reyes pressed the comm switch, his tone sharp. Hold your position, do not fire, do not engage, just monitor. He turned back to Mira. If this thing merges with us, we lose our humanity, don't you see that? Mira shook her head slowly. Maybe we'll finally find what humanity truly means. Reyes clenched his fists, pacing across the deck. All my life, I've searched for answers out there, he said bitterly. But maybe some questions should never be answered. Mira smiled faintly. And yet you still came this far. He looked at her, his eyes tired but determined. Because I wanted to understand the universe, not become part of it. The ship trembled slightly as waves of light rippled through the hull. Mira's voice softened. You don't understand, Reyes. They're not trying to control us. They want to join us, to help us survive what's coming. He frowned. What's coming? Mira looked distant, her voice barely a whisper. A collapse. Something is devouring the stars. They've seen it and they can stop it, but only if we let them in. Reyes stared at her. Speechless, the cube pulsed brighter, the hum turning into a deep, melodic vibration that shook the air. Outside, the light cloud began to swirl faster, forming a vast spiral like a living storm. The ship's AI flickered and spoke in a broken tone. Warning, dimensional threshold approaching, structural integrity. 32%, the crew shouted through the comms, panic spreading. Kara's voice broke. Commander, the energy field is wrapping around us. We can't hold it much longer. Reyes looked at Mira desperately. If we let it in, we lose everything we are. She stepped closer to him, the glow around her stronger than ever. And if we don't, everything we are will die anyway. He looked into her glowing eyes and saw something he hadn't seen before. Peace. She wasn't afraid anymore, Mira, he whispered. If you do this, there's no turning back, she nodded. There never was. Her hands touched the cube and the entire ship exploded with light. The crew screamed as everything turned white, but there was no pain. No heat, only weightlessness. Voices filled the air. Not human, not alien, but pure emotion. Mira floated in a sea of memories, seeing everything. The birth of stars, the fall of worlds, the endless loop of creation, and within it she saw herself, small, fragile but infinite. When she opened her eyes, she wasn't on the ship anymore. She stood in a vast field of light, the cube floating before her. It spoke inside her mind, its voice calm and ancient. You have chosen connection, it said. Now you will carry us, and we will carry you. She looked down and saw her hands glowing brighter, her heartbeat merging with the pulse. She wasn't just Mira anymore. She was something new, something vast. Behind her, faint shapes appeared, then the crew, their faces peaceful, eyes filled with the same light. Reyes stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Mira, he said softly, what did you do? She smiled. I didn't end humanity. I saved it. Outside, the storm of light expanded, sending ripples across the universe. Every star it touched began to shimmer, as if awakening, and from that moment something changed, not just in space, but in every human mind. They all felt it, the pulse, the connection, the truth. The ship's name glowed faintly in the distance. Odyssey, drifting through eternity. Half human, half Elythian, it became the first of a new kind. A bridge between life and light, between fear and understanding. And in the center of it all, Mira stood smiling, because the pulsing finally stopped. Not from silence, but because it had found its rhythm. A rhythm shared by every living soul in the galaxy. The silence after the light was endless. It was not the silence of emptiness, but of peace. The kind of silence that comes after a storm, when everything finally breathes again. The Odyssey floated quietly in the middle of the glowing void, surrounded by rivers of soft blue light. Every panel, every wall, every bolt hummed with faint life. The ship was no longer just metal. It felt alive. Mira stood in the command deck, her figure glowing faintly in the soft light. Her eyes still shimmered with the Elythian energy, but there was calm in them now. The pulse that once tormented her was now steady and gentle. She felt it not just in her heart, but in the air, the ship, and even the stars beyond. Every beat was connected, a rhythm shared by everything that existed. Reyes entered the deck quietly. He looked different, older somehow. Tired but at peace, he had felt the connection too, felt the weight of knowledge pressing softly in his mind. He understood now what Mira had meant. It wasn't about surrendering humanity. It was about expanding it. Mira, he said slowly, his voice softer than before. It's quiet. She turned to him, smiling faintly. Yes, the storm is over. Reyes looked out at the glowing field of energy outside. Where are we? She closed her eyes, listening. Nowhere and everywhere, she whispered. We are in between worlds. Reyes frowned. You mean we didn't survive? She smiled again. No, we evolved. The ship's systems flickered to life. Displaying unfamiliar patterns, symbols that weren't human filled the screens. Glowing like constellations, the AI's voice returned. But it was no longer mechanical. It sounded soft, alive, like a child learning to speak. Captain Mira, it said. Connection complete. Harmony established. Reyes blinked. The AI, it's changed. Mira nodded. It's not just the AI anymore. It's part of them, part of us. The rest of the crew slowly gathered on the deck. Kara, Jin, and the others stood silently, staring at the view outside. Their eyes glowed faintly, but their faces were calm. They didn't need to speak to understand each other anymore. Thoughts flowed between them like whispers carried by light. Reyes felt it too. A presence in his mind, gentle and warm. He wasn't alone in his thoughts anymore. It was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Mira looked at her crew, her voice steady. We're not just explorers anymore. We're witnesses to what comes next. Reyes took a deep breath. And what does come next? She turned to the window, watching the light swirl and twist like living galaxies. They're rebuilding, she said softly, not just the stars, but everything that was lost outside. The blue energy flowed outward, spreading across the void like a wave. Each pulse reached distant stars, reigniting them with soft light. It was as if the universe itself was being rewound, healed, made whole again. Mira placed her hand on the glass, watching the glow reflect in her eyes. They gave us their memories. Their strength, their hope, she said. Now we give them life again. Reyes stood beside her, the faintest smile on his face. For the first time, he said, I think I understand what it means to be human. Mira looked at him curiously. And what does it mean? He chuckled softly. It means we keep trying. No matter how small we are, no matter how dark it gets. We keep searching for light, she nodded slowly. And now the light has found us. A deep hum filled the air again. But it was different this time. Steady, harmonious, peaceful. The ship's structure began to shift, glowing lines spreading across its surface. The Odyssey was changing, merging completely with Elythian energy. Panels turned translucent. Corridors pulsed with gentle light. Every part of the ship now breathed with life. Mira could feel the stars through its hull, feel their warmth like a heartbeat. The ship had become a living being, a child of two worlds. Reyes turned to her. Where do we go now? Mira looked out at the sea of light, her expression distant but calm. Wherever the pulse leads us, she said softly. There are others out there, other lost worlds, other dying stars, and we can help them. He nodded slowly. The universe as it was is gone. She smiled faintly. Then let's make a better one. The Odyssey began to move forward, leaving behind the glowing field. Its engines no longer burned, but they sang a low, melodic hum that echoed through the void like music. Everywhere it went, the darkness softened. Tiny points of light began to flicker back into existence. The stars were waking up again far behind them. The Elythian field pulsed one last time, then faded into the distance, its mission complete. Inside the ship, Mira closed her eyes. She could still hear them. Faint whispers of gratitude. You kept our light alive, they said. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled. No, she whispered back. You showed us how to see it. Reyes watched her quietly, feeling the same warmth in his chest, for the first time in his life. He didn't feel small in the vastness of space. He felt connected, part of something infinite outside. The first rays of light from a newborn star touched the hull. It glowed gold against the silver of the ship. Mira looked at it and whispered, the new dawn. And as the Odyssey sailed forward into that newborn light, the pulse of life echoed across the galaxy. A new story had begun, one written not in words but in connection. A story of humanity and light, of two worlds becoming one, and in that eternal rhythm, the universe itself finally began to breathe again.